He's an Islamophile, and he has contempt for the British people, and he protects Islam.
What about King Charles and his increasing links with Islam? Why has the mainstream media also decided that this is a topic off limits as the British public get angrier and angrier about what they see as a betrayal from the head of the Church of England? Tommy Robinson has also weighed in on this after a post from Radio Genoa, writing, I guess he's thanking them for their rapes across the nation, or maybe he's thanking them for all of the terrorism. That is in response to this video. Watch.
Quran says, God does not burden any soul with more than it can bear. We hope that you have a blessed and fulfilling Ramadan. Peace be upon you all. Ramadan Mubarak. As Muslims across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth observe the beginning of the holiest of months in the Islamic calendar, the month of Ramadan, I just wanted to convey my heartfelt best wishes to you all, and to tell you just how much my wife and I are thinking of you at this special time of year, as this would have been a joyous time. Mosques would be filling with life, Muslim families would be coming together to share food and prayers, and many of them would be inviting their neighbours and friends, of all faiths and none, to join them. My wife and I can only offer you all our kindest and most special wishes, and stress just how greatly the contribution of Muslims to the life of the United Kingdom is appreciated and valued, embodying the Ramadan spirit of charity and selflessness. As the Quran says, God does not burden any soul with more than it can bear. We hope that you have a blessed and fulfilling Ramadan.
The Quran says a lot else, King Charles, a lot else, and you maybe need to start thinking about that. What's interesting, though, is that the MSN position on this is that if you're a Brit questioning King Charles's position, you're some sort of extremist. It's the same type of way that they treated Brexiteers. You know, you're a bit stupid, you're a bit nutty, because look at this post from Politics Joe. We know what the undertones was here when they posted this woman outside an asylum hotel protest in London, describing the king as an Islamophile, and they look down their nose at this woman, where indeed I look at this woman and I think, actually, you're where the vast majority of the population is at. Watch this. Big news. Outspoken is now available as a podcast too. So please do subscribe wherever you get yours, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and make sure you rate and review. I'll take 5 stars, if you may.
I am very, very upset with King Charles, who is not like his mother. He's the absolute opposite. He's an Islamophile, and he has contempt for the British people, and he protects Islam. Never once said happy Easter or whatever, but yeah, anything in the Muslim culture, you know, he's immediately there.
I mean, he did give the Christmas message.
Yeah, not one Easter one though, did he? So, you know, but he did for the various Muslim festivals amply, and then I can't remember. He made a comment. I mean, it's just he has complete contempt for his people.
Now, the mainstream media obviously have contempt for that woman and her views, but I don't. And I preface this, as always, by saying I find it really difficult because everyone knows, right? I'm a monarchist. I'm a royalist. But when it comes to now King Charles, I've also been very public about the fact, including just a year before the death of the late Queen Elizabeth II, that if Charles continued as monarch to weigh in against hot-button political issues, including, at the time, Boris Johnson's Rwanda scheme, and now, as king, Donald Trump's rhetoric about illegal immigration, which he refuses to call illegal immigration, he calls it irregular immigration, then the monarchy could be in trouble. And the left is circling by the way. I'll come to that in just one moment. But first, I want to bring in Connor Tomlinson. Connor, it was very obvious that Politics Joe thought here that they were doing what happened so much after Brexit, right? Oh, let's find one of these stupid Brexit voters and try and make them say something stupid because it helps our cause. But indeed, I watched that woman outside the migrant hotel, and I think, goodness me, you're saying what my viewers are saying. There is serious concern about King Charles' ties to Islam and his position on the Islam faith as the head of the Church of England that the mainstream media in this country, to be frank, Connor, is covering up.
Quite, and even though Politics Joe tried to fact check her with the edits there saying King Charles put out an Easter message, what they forgot to mention is that he crowbarred a mention of Islam into the Easter message. No mention of Christianity, of course, in his Ramadan message where he was stumbling through those Quran verses there. He said, or at least wrote on the royal website, quote, "The love he showed when he walked the earth reflected the Jewish ethic of caring for the stranger and those in need, a deep human instinct echoed in Islam and other religious traditions, and in the hearts of all who seek the good of others." Now, I would like to read a couple of Quran verses, if I may, and I hope this still gets you monetized on YouTube, Dan. Given the idea that Islam is so welcoming of outsiders. I think they have a word for them. It's called kafir. It means unbelievers. So in the Quran it says, when you meet the unbelievers in battle, smite at their necks. Also the punishment of those who wage war against Allah and his messenger and strive with might and main for mischief through the land is execution or crucifixion or the cutting off of hands and feet from opposite sides or exile for the land. So, you know, they're very detailed about what they would quite like to do to atheists, Christians, Jews, people like yourself, Dan. And so for King Charles, to meet with Muslim leaders, to exalt Islam at every opportunity, to have in February invited chief rabbis, but also imams to Buckingham Palace, I think it was, to sign these sort of reconciliation accords, to foster interfaith dialogue. Strange, isn't it, how the Christians themselves were not present. And he invited a chap called Carrier Sim. He's the head imam at the Leeds Mosque. He's also on Hope Not Hate's charitable trust board. And when 7/7 happened, when 7/7 happened, he was the one who was quoted in The Guardian saying actually Muslims are the main victim. So a deeply subversive and odious human being. King Charles thinks he's a legitimate voice for the future of religious freedoms in Britain. Remember, by the way, that he took the oath as the wanted to take the oath as the defender of the faiths. And it seems that the one faith he has omitted from defence there is Britain's historic and established one, Christianity.
Well, the thing is, Connor, what's so interesting, of course, is that what he doesn't realise, or at least what he seems not to realise, is that if he continues going down this path, then there will be no kingdom to defend. I mean, during the state dinner with Emmanuel Macron, when he said that there was no border at all between France and the United Kingdom, well, that surely also means that there's no British royal family.
Well, there's no borders in a caliphate, Dan, and perhaps he's hoping to be appointed the head of one. There's two potential options here, and one is represented by, I think, what King Charles himself is, but also the sort of man that David Cameron was when he's leading the Conservative Party and pledging to Muslim communities to pack the party full of Muslims, not just to fend off accusations that Theresa May once repeated that the party was the nasty party and that they were too pale, male and stale and they needed to do something about it, but because David Cameron is an Arabist, someone who fancies himself a bit of a Lawrence of Arabia and romanticizes the House of Saud and other Emiratis nations in the Gulf region as great civilizations whose history should be revered and respected along with the British Empire. I think this is completely disconnected from the underlying Islamic ethos that has acted as a limiting force on those civilizations' ability to achieve peace and prosperity. The actual reason that the Emiratis and the Saudis and the like have become more sensible in recent years is because they're trending more towards a sort of ethno-cultural worship rather than being devoutly Islamic, which is why they've liberalized things for women in Saudi Arabia and normalized relations with Israel. I think King Charles is probably an Arabist. The alternative is, and considering his affiliation with the World Economic Forum and his obsession with green issues, he falls along the lines of what Politics Joe does, or the delusional alliance between the Green Party and the Islamists who are more concerned with Gaza than Great Britain. And that is that he thinks everyone from everywhere has a universal human nature, that beneath all these artificial layers of cultural difference, economic outcomes, and just geographical space, that everyone is identical. And so, if you elevate foreign cultures, if you revere and respect them, if you foster good relations with them, everyone can suddenly become sort of holding hands in a John Lennon's imagined utopia, rather than you allowing the Trojan horse of Islam to move through your very real borders and actually undermine all of the liberal human rights doctrines for sexuality and transgenderism and feminism that you hold and revere so dearly. And so what he could also be doing at the same time is undermining all of the givens upon which his liberalism rests, and not understanding that Islam is not just one among many religions on a global civilizational buffet, but actually a completely parallel and incompatible moral system that has dark designs for the future of the UK.
Very well put. I think there's something else that King Charles really doesn't realise at the moment, Connor, as he cozies up constantly to the woke left and to the Islamists, is that it's these groups that actually want to finish the royal family. And Scheming Sturgeon, the former First Minister of Scotland, who's on her book tour, actually said the quiet bit out loud this morning, in an interview on BBC Breakfast. I found it hugely significant, actually, because remember, she never went down this path when she was in power. But now out and out saying, with the Queen gone, the monarchy is going to be finished too. Watch.
One thing I'm absolutely certain about, based on all my experience of speaking to her, and I would say this about the royal family more widely, is that when Scotland votes to become independent, they will respect that, because I think they respect the decisions that people take. So, yeah, I'm, as I said at the outset of this section, I'm a Republican, but I had such incredible respect for the Queen, a remarkable woman.
Just finally on the royals, one paragraph really stuck out to me. Having had the opportunity to observe the royal family up close, I have little doubt that history will look back on the day of her death, Queen Elizabeth's death, as the beginning of its end.
I think however long the span of that might be, so I'm not saying that will be 10, I mean, it could be 100 years. There's part, and time will tell whether I'm right or wrong here. There was such a mystique around the Queen. Literally, there's a picture on the screen there. If you were in a room and the Queen walked in, even if you weren't looking at, you could feel her presence. And that sounds a bit strange to say, but there was a mystique around. Partly, she reigned for much of her time before social media and before 24-hour news. So, and while, I'm not criticising the rest of the royal family, I've got respect for them too, there's not that. And I think without that, over time, perhaps the absurdities of monarchy will start to come to the fore much more without the personality of the Queen to keep it going. So that's my prediction, but time will tell whether I'm right about that.
So I thought that was a very significant intervention, Connor, from a leader so recently out of power, out and out, banging the Republican drum. And I know you can say, well, look, she's a separatist. There's a whole load of reasons why she might do that. But again, Charles has to stop being so naive. These enemies, and, I would put someone like Nicola Sturgeon on the side of the Islamists, want the end of the British monarchy.
Yeah, I don't think you're exaggerating there, Dan, given she was the handmaiden of Hamza Yousaf's very short tenure in office. He sort of flopped like his attempt to riding a scooter there. I think as far as Nicola Sturgeon goes, you can probably build her a padded cell out of all the unsold copies of those books that she's peddling. Unfortunately, she'll probably have to share it with the trans man. However, mental though she is...
But she's fine with that. She's cool with that,
Yeah. One with face tattoos, I'm sure, who has his meat and two veg intact. However, mental as though she is, I do think she has a point in that the Queen is a world historical figure, and she did embody lots of the good qualities about Britain, particularly following during the 20th century. the sort of times of change. She served as a constant, a kind of reference point for Britain as it was going through a series of undesirable changes thanks to the post-war Tony Blair and even Boris governments. And to have her gone almost completely deracinates all of our institutions from what we had before. I mean, I was born in 1997. I don't know a Britain different than the UK, spelled Y-O-O-K-A-Y, the sort of incoherent multicultural mess that we've currently inherited. But the older generations, and particularly the Queen, did. And now with Charles in charge, happily stewarding this Blairite revolution, pushing Britain further towards the careening cliff face that we're approaching civilizationally as we fall into predictions of civil unrest, I do think the monarchy has lost a lot of its legitimacy. And that's a great shame because there's nothing more than the great egalitarian levelers like Nicola Sturgeon, Keir Starmer, or the entire civil service would like than to abolish the one final, traditional, hierarchical institution that cannot be infiltrated by some jumped up, appointed, mid-witted, middle-class civil servant who shoots up the career ladder like it's a lift on diversity quotas. I think the only way to spare the monarchy at this point is, yes, a sufficient government that comes in and shows some muscularity around British culture, that sacks the civil service, and that challenges the Blairite settlement and basically forces the king's hand to sign via either orders in council or, at least in his speech, off on these radical proposals. Otherwise, if he doesn't do as the will of the people do, he himself will look even more precariously illegitimate. And so they might be able to force the king's hand in his position of weakness to get through all of the things that we want done, even though he himself would be very unhappy to see mass deportations go through.
I guess one of the issues, Connor, is that this is probably going to be a short reign, given the king's incurable cancer. However, Prince William has shown even less affinity to the Church of England than his father, which was always something that worried the late Queen Elizabeth II. Do you have more hope for William?
Not regarding the Church of England. I mean, I don't think the Church of England actually knows it's the current established church of the country at this point, Dan. And among my generation, and I suppose I've been slightly emblematic of this, Catholic Zoomers are outnumbering Anglicans 2-1, and that gap is only going to grow as more Anglican boomers die off and more Catholics have lots more children. We're sort of in a demographic arms race with the Muslims to keep our country intact. I think what might end up happening is if you either get the first atheist king and the Church of England disestablishes itself, or a successor to Charles gravitates towards a different denomination as emblematic of a growing religious revival, particularly Christianity, among Gen Z. I don't know what William's private observance is like. I doubt he will be the one to do this, but perhaps one of his children may help spearhead, at least culturally, Christian revival in this country, even if the Church of England, Henry VIII's personal divorce court, becomes